Right. Leanne, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. How you doing?
Oh, I'm so good. Thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. It's great to connect with you again and to do the podcast. And I just kind of thought I'd kind of introduce you because you're an author, speaker, strategist, marketing consultant, and coach, and you've got a selection of books which are kind of like in a series. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's is it 5 seasons of connection, and then you've got like different topics. So you've got like business brilliance, love partner, and like is it kindness to your child? Um,
hmm
like what kind of got you into this, and like your kind of story and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I do have the three books, and they really mapped out what I needed at the time. So the first one I wrote was connecting to your children because I wanted to be a great mom. So I really was worried if I was short with them or frustrated with them all the time. So that book came out first. The next book was then connecting to your love partner, so your husband or your wife or your spouse in some way, because of course, when the marriage is solid, when the relationship is solid, other things in your life go well. And then the third book is on business brilliance, and it isn't a book about market, even though I'm a marketing expert. It really is about the mindset that goes into building a business that fulfills both your professional needs and your personal desires for your life. So I have the three books so far, and they're all kind of based around this system I called the 5 seasons. And basically, I looked at, the seasons in the world. I live in North America. So I have trees outside my window. So winter is a time where things are really cold and blustery, and the winter is harsh, and we feel isolated and alone. Right. So, in any of our relationships, if that's what we're feeling in our relationship, we're in winter. And then what happens after winter is we decide to spring clean, right? So there are strategies to reconnect and repair the relationship to go into a better time. So that might mean apologizing or giving forgiveness to the other person. It might be rebuilding, your confidence in some way. It might be setting up routines or systems in your life that make it better, so there's less misunderstandings or confusion. So spring is really a time to do the work, just like it is in your garden. And you do the work because you want to get to summer. And summer is the best it could be. You are happy and you are full and things are blooming and you are just filled with love and joy, right? So that is your main focus, is just being in summer. But what happens is sometimes we're in summer and a cold chill will blow through. So maybe that is, somebody has a snarky response, or somebody says something and it kind of hits you in the wrong way. That's fall. And that's a signal that winter is back on its way unless you course correct in that moment. So it isn't quite full on winter, but this could lead to a fight with your partner, or you could bark at your children, right? So this is that moment that you're like, something is changing. And then the fifth season doesn't exist in the world, obviously, but for me, it's called the crossroads. And at the crossroads, it's the place where we decide, what do we want the outcome of this to be? So if we're standing here and our partner says something a little bit sharp, or our kids roll their eyes and, back talk a little bit, we think, okay, hold on one second. I'm at the crossroads. I can either go to winter and fight with them and tell them how rude they are and, really go into that winter conflict, or I can choose summer and say, hey, that was a little bit sharp. Is everything okay? Right. And then they could say, actually, I'm really hungry, or I'm really stressed, or, I just got off the phone with my mother and I'm very upset about something. Right. So it could not be about you, but by fighting with them, you lose the problem, right, in the mess. So the crossroads is a place for you to decide, where do I want to go in this relationship in this moment? And how can we get there so that we go back to summer together? So this is kind of the system that I teach on, and it's what I use to help people in their businesses and in their relationships. And it's kind of changed my life. And I know it changes people who I work with because it's so simple, but it really keeps personal responsibility at the very top of our minds, right? So I am responsible for my reactions. I am responsible for my emotions. I'm responsible for my behaviors. I can absolutely be upset, but if I'm going to like yell at my children for 2 hours for, the fight I had with my girlfriend, I'm not taking full responsibility for my behavior and I'm dumping my winter storm onto other people. So it really has been this, I don't know, it's a super cool tool that I use. And I think it's been really great.
I really like the way you've structured that, and to have that perspective and way of seeing, like life is different seasons, because it kind of is like
Yeah.
it that when you think about it. You think of those seasons like winter, it's quite harsh.
Yeah.
Spring, where I am, it's kind of springtime now, so things are kind of a bit more lighter.
Yeah.
But like taking responsibility, like you said, for what is going on in your life, and how almost like emotions that you feel are, kind of represent the seasons that we experience. And it's like, if you can, what you're saying, like if you can approach a situation in a different season, then it's going to create a different outcome, isn't it? Whereas if
Yeah.
you're quite harsh and say winterish with someone, then that's, you're probably going to get that back. It might escalate.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good way of seeing things.
Thank you. And it goes to
Welcome.
so many different levels. I was talking with my sister the other day, and we were talking about her driving on the highway. And, there was some person on the highway driving really aggressively, cutting people off, zipping in and out of traffic. And, she said, I looked around and I could see other drivers getting really angry, right? Like having this road rage reaction to this idiot driving really strangely. And I'm like, yeah, they were pushed into fall and winter because their hands were tight on their steering wheel and they were angry and aggressive, right? Instead of choosing summer and just saying, wow, I hope that guy gets where he wants to go safely. He is not being safe right now. I hope he gets there safely. And that, in that very small moment, is just a way to choose the outcome so that you aren't bundled up with adrenaline, right? Because remember, when we go to winter, when we're fighting with people, when we are triggered into these big, heavy negative emotions, those are brain chemicals being released in our body, right? So we have all of these brain chemicals that get released and they're flooding through our system. So it's really hard just to turn it off because we want to turn it off. If you get to that state of being flooded emotionally, it actually has to go through your whole system and get out. And it takes 20 to 30 minutes for your blood pressure and your hormones to return to a normal state after you've been flooded with this kind of like massive hate and rage. So it can't just be something you flip on and off. So we want to try to stop people from getting to that level of, complete flooded anger more often so that their body isn't suffering under the stresses of all of these chemicals in their blood.
Mm. I think that's a really good point, and I think, like you said, it's those like fight and flight responses, isn't it? Stress, cortisol, and
Yeah.
that kind of rage, or you know s- you know yeah, it's like rage, and that's like you can associate that with that harsh winter season, or
Yeah.
like those scenarios. But I think like that's what happens to a lot of people, isn't you
Yeah.
react. People, I think if you're not being mindful of, like you said, of how you're reacting or what's going on for you emotionally, then like you said, people are going to react in all different kind of ways based
Right.
on, for example, like someone speeding or something like that. I've been driving, and I've kind of reacted and not shout. I would never shout out to someone, but inside I'm like, well, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And then
For sure.
or trying to react, and be mindful of how you react.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we're recording this, we're a year plus into this pandemic. And I think we've seen a lot of people living for a very long time in winter, right? Because here in North America, we have had severe lockdowns rolling, and, some people in politics don't think there should be any lockdowns. Some people think there are. So there's just a lot of, political and economic uncertainty. And I know where you are, you have a lot of political chaos, right? And there's a lot going on, it just in terms of what's going on with all the things in your part of the world. So
Yeah.
people are living in a heightened state of fear already. So it
Mm,
doesn't take much to push us into winter, right? You could be listening to the news, hear something that your prime minister is doing. It totally makes you lose your mind because you're so
mm,
frustrated. And, you might think he's the worst thing that ever happened to the country, and you turn off the telly, and then your partner comes home and says, yeah, I didn't really feel like pork chops tonight, and you completely explode, right? And it's not about the pork chops, and it's not about
mm,
your partner. It's that you have been living on the edge of winter because of what's going on in your world. So
yeah.
you said it. I mean, being so mindful of where we are and what season we're in, right? What I
Mm,
would say if someone was watching the telly and they were, getting all pumped up because of how much hate they had for their government, it would be turn that off, go for a walk, play with your puppy,
mm,
bring all of that down in your body. Like get yourself back to personal summer. Go take a shower, go take a run, do push-ups on the floor, do whatever you need to do to put yourself back in personal
mm,
summer. And then when your partner comes home and says, yeah, babe, I actually don't want pork chops tonight, you'll be like, okay, well, you can make yourself something else. This is what I made. Right. And it isn't going to trigger you to be like, this rage monster, because it actually, you aren't on the edge from other things that happened. So it really is, being self aware and navigating your emotional storm all the time, right? Like, so how do you get out of those emotional storms of, what's happening with the prime minister? You turn that off, right? And you say, what can I control? What will take me back to where I want to feel good? And you go and do that, right? And I know it's harder in lockdown and people don't have access to the life that they had before, and we adapt. You put on a Zoom video and you start sweating to the oldies, in your living room. You can't go to yoga or Zumba, but you can do something to get yourself out of your own winter. So it just really puts personal
mm.
responsibility front and center.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really key point you mentioned. I think like especially with I think since COVID's happened, people have been affected in all different um, parts of their lives. I think there's like a spectrum with it. People have been doing really well and not experiencing certain things. Some people really have, experienced certain things. And I think like the weather, it reminded me back to because we just kind of slowly coming out of a lockdown after 4 months. And um, I remember like during the winter period, where I live, it was particularly harsh. Like England, it rains a lot of the time. It was windy. It was dark at like 4 or 5 o'clock,
Right.
and it it can kind of affect you because you want
Yeah.
more sunlight, and then you might not be getting that sunshine. And then all of those external factors, and I think, like you said, that's kind of what happens to people. Things externally kind of build up, and yet that's why what you said, you have to be so mindful of what you look at
Yeah.
and your energy. And because if you're watching the news or you feel stressed or you see something on social media or what something happens in your home, it's just like like a pile on top of one another. And then you see the news, the prime minister or whatever, and then because it's ongoing all the time. And like you
It
have to, like you
is.
said, you have to look at what you can control,
Yeah.
and you can't control the news and the media and everything that's kind of going on with that or the weather. So I
Yeah.
mean, but we were saying before we started that like where you live, it rains quite a lot, and I was
It does.
saying it's quite a small thing, but it's quite a big thing because we were saying like if it was like sunny all the time, like how you appreciate things and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, and I think we noticed that over this past winter in particular, just where I am, because I live in a very dark, rainy part of the US. And what typically happens is sometime between January and April, almost everybody who can afford to travel somewhere sunny will travel somewhere sunny because they just can't take the gloominess anymore. It is just so hard on the spirit to be day after day in the dark and the rain, and nobody could travel, right? So there were no trips to Hawaii. Nobody was going down to LA. Nobody was going over to Arizona. Nobody was going anywhere. And so there was, a lot more incidences of depression, of anger, children, being on social media saying, I can't take this anymore. I need to get out of this life. Right. And so it really does affect us. So even though we think, oh, it's such a small thing, Adam, I think it's a really big thing, right? Being able to say, where am I right now? How am I feeling? And what do I need to do to bring myself back to a place of emotional summer? And so for me, I have clients all over the US. And for the people who are really in this dark emotional winter state, it would be go on Amazon, order yourself something that you find joy in, either order a new book or go on the library and order a new digital copy of a book, order some painting supplies. And people would say, oh, I've never painted before. Perfect. Let's start painting, right? Like get a paint by number and then go into Canvas or, do other kinds of creative things you've never thought to do because now is the gift of time. You cannot leave your house. You aren't going to Hawaii. So let's find things that you can do. Maybe you realize you love puzzles. Maybe you want to redecorate a room. Maybe you want to scrapbook some of your photos, right? Let's get creative, and tapping into everyone's creative spirit is very freeing because they find a joy that they didn't remember, right? So one woman started to paint these little simple tiles of her pets, and she put it on Facebook, and she's like, oh, here's my Maltese and here's my my German Shepherd, and people were like, oh my god, you're such an artist, can you paint my dog? And now all of a sudden she has this thriving side hustle she didn't even know she could do. It didn't even occur to her. But because she tapped into a way to find personal summer, she was, she found this, this income generating opportunity she would never have found before. So yes, we can be dark and sad and angry and depressed and pissed off and, upset at the way of the world, and we can also choose to behave differently, right? And we can say, what would bring me joy? Like, I love music. Maybe I learn how to play guitar or piano. Maybe I learn how to drum. Maybe I learn to sing better. Maybe I join a virtual choir and people all over the world join, online in Zoom, and we all sing at the same, like, the possibilities are kind of endless at this point, right? We have the entire planet in a way available to ways that we've never seen before. So, yes, feel the heavy, dark, sad, angry, jealous, miserable feelings. And when you're ready to spring clean those, find something to do because spring is about action. So, go do something that takes you out of that funk and really brings you to a place of, creative expression and exploration, because that is a gift that we can give ourselves anytime.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really great point, and I agree with you. And I think like with the lockdown and the essence of time, as you said, like it is, kind of there's a silver lining to the whole situation, and I think people are being forced to look at things. I mean, and what was working. I mean, what's not working, and things are coming up for people, so it is difficult. But
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, that lady just started painting, creating something, put it out there, and people like it. Now she's got a thing on the side that she can do. That's probably making a bit of income. And
Yeah.
there's, but like I said, there's so many possibilities, and especially with the internet. I mean, there's so many things that you can do, and I've seen people do those music kind of dance Zumba things online on Zoom, and lots of other things. And I think um, it is definitely a silver lining to the situation. I think people just need to get out of that victim mentality and really kind of own what's going on, and realize that there were different things that they can do. I mean, like I said, everyone's in different situations, so for a lot of people it is very, very difficult, and they may have mental health problems, things that might be going on at home. But
Mhm.
they can look at things that are positive, things that they can read, like reading books, reading, looking at uh people online. There are so many other outlets for
Mhm.
people to kind of go into, like.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely not, and like you, I'm not ever going to, slam anybody with um, any kind of emotional stresses, if they have medical conditions, if there are things really horrific in their life. That is absolutely a true statement, right? Like people have horrific things happening for them. And when they're ready to reach out and find support, there are new ways to find support that we've never had before. And I get it, right? I had a brain crash in 2006 and they couldn't figure out what happened. And after 8 months of testing, they gave me 5 years to live. And I had a newborn, a 3 year old, and a 5 year old. So I was not ready to die. I had very young children. And that was what I was understanding, that I had this condition that was going to kill me. Those are dark, stressful times. And if anybody is listening to this and you are living with something that looms over you like a medical diagnosis, it is really hard to choose to be happy. It is really hard. You're just like, there's no point. There's no point in me doing something nice. There's no point in me learning how to paint or play piano. What does it matter? Right. And it matters because you're here today. They said I had 5 years to live. It's been 15 years and I'm still here. Now, I still have the condition, but I'm writing books. I'm speaking on stages. I'm traveling when I can. I'm, being creative as best I can do. I'm reaching out to people, all over the world, like you, Adam. I mean, I would have never met you a year ago, right? Like, this is just the beauty of what's going
Yeah.
on. And I still have a medical condition that makes me very sick, right?
Mm.
So, yes, hard things are real. I am not discounting it, but I'm here today. And if I'm
Mm.
here today, how can I make today the best?
Mm.
Right? Because I don't want to just wait until I'm dead. I don't want to
Mm.
just coast through my life
Mm.
until it's over. I
Yeah.
have this life. What can I do with it? How can I
Mm.
use my gifts and my talents to make somebody's life better, to make somebody's day better? Can
Mm.
I drop a note in somebody's inbox and be like, I'm thinking about you. And I remember our times laughing at the beach. And I just really miss that. I hope you have a good day.
Mm.
It takes me 2 minutes and it takes me out of my victim space of, oh my God, I have this disease,
Mm.
to, oh my gosh, Kelly is going to wake up this morning. She's going to open up her inbox and she will be taken back to those memories of us at the beach. Nicely done, Leanne. It didn't cost me anything. It took a few moments of time, but it was the intention of, can I live the best I can in this moment? And not everybody can live the best at the same level, right? Some people's best will be very, very small baby steps, and other people's bests will be bigger. And that's okay. Don't look at what other people are doing. Think about your life. How can you make it the best for you in this moment, even if that's closing your eyes and dreaming about a different life, dreaming about being in a different place, dreaming that things were different? Maybe you are a budding screenwriter and you're going to write, a great, amazing novel out of the sadness that you feel or the hardship that you have right now. What if you, create something out of your pain and it becomes your passion and your purpose? We have to we have to decide that that's what we want. And to get back to emotional summer, it means you have to take action in some way. So I love this conversation so much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, same here. And I think it's amazing what you're doing. And I think like in the way you're, working with it, because I think like, a lot of times people do get in a victim mentality. And I think sometimes, like in life, like you said, you don't want to wait until, you're grateful for today, and, you're living for today, living today and doing your best. And I think that's what it's all about, showing up, doing your best. And there's going to be hard days, but to keep on pushing forward. And I think like you've got this condition where they said like 5 years. I mean that's insane, and it's been 15 years. And I think like a lot of the time, sometimes I think sometimes people can probably get complacent, or they don't think about the bigger picture, if that makes sense, and they just kind of coast along. And I mean, if people are happy coasting along, fine. But
Totally.
like when they deep down want to be doing much more, and they're
Hmm.
wasting time doing things that aren't benefiting them, and they're not taking life seriously.
Hmm.
And sometimes that happens to people. They get to a certain age or something happens, and then they kind of realize. But
Hmm.
I think it's really such an important thing to talk about. And
Yeah.
you're in a place where you're doing your best and you wanted to make a difference, and utilizing time and your life. I think we're all here. We should all be here for that reason, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a life worth living, and part of what I feel happens is when people feel disempowered and they don't think they can do anything, or they get stuck and they just resign themselves to living this kind of mediocre life, or this fine life, or this kind of not even great life. I think part of it is because they haven't created a dream so juicy, so magnificent, that it gets them out of bed in the morning saying, what can I do to move me towards my dream? Right. So for me, it was, how do I make the most of my 5 years? Right. So in the early days, I'm like, what did I always want? I'm like, I want to see the world. Like, I want to travel. And so I made a promise to myself that I would visit 50 countries before I turned 50, which was like this crazy goal, because 50 years old was 10 years past my expiration date. So it wasn't even realistic. I was 35 when I got the diagnosis. So I thought, oh my gosh, 50 countries before I turn 50. That's the big goal. And last January, before lockdown, my kids and my husband and I returned from country 57, right? And I'm not 50 yet. So would I have ever dragged my three children around the planet 57 times? No, of course not.
Mm,
But I set the goal and I'm like, this is where all of our money goes. This is where
mm.
all of our vacation goes. And my job is to find the cheapest way to get 5 people around the planet. Right. So it would
Yeah.
be like staying in these really fun apartments or these really tiny little hostels, and doing things differently. But oh my gosh, we did it, right? And I think that would have never happened if I didn't say what I wanted. If I was like, oh, I wish we could travel someday, we wouldn't have gone anywhere. So
Mm,
having a goal that is so clear and specific, I want to write a book. I want to speak on a stage. I want to start a business. I want to raise a farm of bunnies. I want to live in the country. Whatever that dream is, I think the first step is always, what is that dream? And then what can you do every day, even if it's just doing 10 minutes of research online about what it's like to live in the country, or what it's like to write a book, or taking an online course about starting a business.
mm,
There's always something you can do to move in the direction of your dreams. But if you don't have a direction, you aren't going anywhere, because you don't see the point and it feels too big and hard and scary. So whenever someone comes to me and they're feeling like, I'm stuck, I can't do anything, I don't know what my life is about, that's the first question. Let's figure out what your life is about, right? What
mm,
would you be able to do so that if the doctors came to you and said, hey, Adam, you know what? You've got this thing. We don't know
mm,
what it is, but we're pretty sure it's going to kill you. You've
mm,
got 5 years.
mm,
What is it that you want to get done in that 5 year period, so that if, God forbid, you do end up not making it past the 5 years, you did everything you wanted to do while
mm,
you could do it.
mm,
Right. And so by having that perspective of, oh my gosh, I better get on it to write that book. Why am I waiting?
mm.
Or I want to plan, weddings in Hawaii. That's my dream job. Okay, let's get you started in that dream. So it just kind of gives power back to people.
Yeah. No, definitely. Well, it is very, very powerful, isn't it, when you put it into that perspective, and you put it into that place. It kind
Right.
of it makes you ultimately think. And I think, like, because people are sometimes certain ages, or I mean, I think it's the kind of human experience, isn't it? The part of the journey, we kind of just think we've got like infinite time, and it's like, well, we do have a lot of time, but it's not
Mhm.
infinite. And I think when you're put in that place, it really does make you think and, you know, act on it because, you know, like what if, you know, and,
Yeah.
you know, you don't want regret. So, yeah, I think it's really powerful. And I think it's great that, you know, all that you're doing, you know, is really inspiring. And I mean, it's important to have these kind of conversations about, you know, because it puts things together into perspective and,
Right.
you know, hopefully, you know, I think when sometimes people hear these experiences or they see it, you know, they start thinking about their lives and they think, you know,
Yeah.
gosh, what am I not doing or what could I be doing? And
Totally.
it's
And
really important, isn't it?
it is really important. And, it isn't just about death. I mean, my story in particular, I had 5 years to live, but,
Mm,
there are countless stories. A friend of mine, she had all these big dreams. She had all of these big plans. She wanted to do all of these amazing things. And she went for a weekend away camping with her friends. They found a bridge. They jumped off the bridge. She fell a little bit weird and she severed her spine and she's in a wheelchair. And she was at the time like 25 years old. So everything she was saying, oh, I want to do this someday. Oh, I want to do that someday. All of a sudden, she just thinks, I can't do anything anymore. Right? We never know what our path is going to unfold for us. So you saying, I'll do it when the kids are grown and out of the house, or I'll do it when I retire, or I'll do it, when I get money in 10 years after I've been working for 10 years. That might work out for you. It
mm,
might not. So if your dreams are worth fighting for, then start now, right? Like
mm,
decide what you want. If it's writing a book, you don't need to wait to retirement to write a book. You can open up a Word document after this podcast and
yeah.
say, I was born here, or my life's took a turn for the worse the day I came home and my father, blah, 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 right? You can
Mm,
literally start today on some of your dreams. So I would just ask people to check, like, are they afraid of their dreams, or are they afraid they haven't believed in themselves that someone like them even has what it takes to reach their dream?
mm,
Because you could dream about owning a yacht in Monaco and driving a Formula One car and, or playing in a big sports team, and that may never happen.
mm,
But you want the feeling of what that gives you. You want the power of what that kind of life does. So maybe you can't do a Formula One race, because you're not in that league, but maybe you join, your local track and you do race car training, and then you become a teacher and teach other kids how to
mm,
race car track. I mean, there are ways to do things on your path. Even if you really never reach the big, big dream, I bet you'd be more happy being in a race car, driving around a track, teaching
mm,
other people how to do it, than sitting at your house wishing you had the courage.
mm. Yeah, no, it's really, really true, isn't it? And I think like, you know, it's like looking at what can you do? You know, like you might not have X, Y, Z, but what can you do kind of working towards that or something similar to that? And I think about it with podcasting, you know, I haven't got a podcasting studio, but I'm doing one in my car, you know, I'm
Yeah.
doing one anyway, you
Hmm.
know, because hopefully like I said, that intention of having a studio one day. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
totally.
just kind of start just get the ball kind of rolling. And I say that to people all the time. And I think, you know, like it is scary. It's going to be scary sometimes stepping out the comfort zone of the unknown, but
Totally.
it's far scarier not doing it, I find. Like,
Right.
and it's so true what you mentioned. And I think like just to have those dreams and to envision kind of where you want to go. And if it's not the exact same thing, then, you know, like ask yourself what else is it that I can do? You know,
Yeah,
if you can't get a One racing car, go to like track racing or practice something kind of leading up to it,
totally.
or you know, in the same kind of field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, can you imagine if you didn't start your podcast because you didn't have a studio?
Mm,
Like, what has podcasting brought your life, right? Like how many people you've interacted with and how many stories you've shared and how many people's
mm,
lives you've touched, right? Like how many people are listening to this podcast right now who
mm.
would be kind of lost and sad if you never started the podcast because you didn't have a studio, right? You
Yeah.
don't always think about what other people's experiences of your genius are. If I didn't write
Mm,
my books, there would still be parents yelling at their kids,
Yeah.
and fighting with them and struggling with their teens, and wishing their husband would just divorce them once and for all because they can't stand them anymore. But I wrote these books, and now people's families are being changed, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't always think about what it would have been had we not been brave and courageous. So everybody has that inside of them. Everybody has that ability to choose to be brave and courageous and do the thing that they feel called to do. So I love that you're doing your podcast from your car. I think it should be called that too, like a
Yeah.
podcast from the car. I think that's amazing.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. Really, really grateful for your support. And yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? When you think about the ripple effects of you and what you're doing, and those kind of ripples that affect other people and what they take from it, and like we don't always think of that sometimes, but when you put it like that, kind of highlights it, doesn't it? And I think
Yeah.
it must be really rewarding, the feedback that you get from people who've read your books and kind of consumed your content as well.
Yeah, I definitely hear a lot about that because I'm in the personal development space. People are very emotional. If I was giving marketing tips and, marketing strategies, I might never know what happens with it. But because, the work that I'm choosing to do is very much in personal development, people come back and they say exactly that. Like, I didn't want to face my partner, or I couldn't stand another day of being with my kids, or my life has been in the toilet for so long. And then I had this shift, right? You opened my eyes to this new way of thinking, and I started to see what was possible. And I started to see what I was capable of. And I started to feel like if she could do it, and, she's got 3 children, she has a brain disease, she's got all kinds of stuff going on. What is my situation? Like, what can I use to move me forward? And the stories are amazing. They really are. And so, even if I didn't get to 50 countries, even if I didn't do all the things on my big dream list, I've done great things, right? And I think that's where we can really be at peace with ourselves in our lives and say, if I have that nudging feeling inside, like you said, like you feel like you're meant to do more or be more in your life, that's telling you you haven't done enough to honor the dreams that are in you. Right? So if you're totally happy and fine, oh my gosh, be happy and fine. I love it. If there's something inside of you that's like, oh, this life does not feel like it fits me perfectly, like there's something missing, that's the time for you to get really quiet. And some people will say meditate, some people will say journal, some people will say go to therapy, some people would say hire a coach, whatever your strategy is, take that strategy and go inside yourself and say, what are the things that I used to love to do, but I don't give myself permission to do anymore, right? And oftentimes it's a creative thing. So people will say, no, 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 I'm an accountant. I have to work at my accounting job. I have to file taxes for people. But I always wished I could be, this other person. I'd always loved to be a sculptor, or I wish I could paint art. I wish I had time or money to, to pursue those passions. Integrate them into your day-to-day life, because you don't want a diagnosis of 5 years to live and decide that's the day you're going to get off your butt and go do the thing you always wanted to do. That's what I did. And I wasted a lot of time not doing the things that I always wanted to do. And I just don't want other people to waste their life like that. So start today, figure out what you want, and start taking the babyest of baby steps to move in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I really agree with you. And I think it's so important, to start now and to just, try things out, figure out what it is that you want to do and what you like, and to take those small steps, as you mentioned, which I think is really important because, I think, I can think about my life. It's, I'm still learning, we're learning things all the time. And I think for me, I try and do 100 things all at once. And it's like, I think we can do that as people, being a person.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's those baby steps and those small steps that lead up to, bigger steps. And I think a lot of the time people put a lot of pressure on themselves and they want it now, and all the rest of it. But it's those kind of small steps, isn't it, that just
Right.
build and compound.
Yeah. My girlfriend and I wanted to get in shape like 3 years ago. And we're like, okay, we've got these mom bodies. We don't want these mom bodies anymore. We want to go get in shape. So every morning at 5:30, we got up, we met each other outside, and we drove to the gym. And it was great and it was fun. And we would get on the bike for a few minutes and warm up and go lift our weights. We had a little program printed out, and we were just like, oh, this is so great. And I was like, I'm happy here. Like, I feel stronger. I'm looking a little bit better. I feel great. And she's like, I didn't realize how much I love lifting weights. And she went on to build competitively. So she is a competitive bodybuilder and she's almost 50. She looks phenomenal. We would have never even tried that had we not said, let's go do this thing. So you never know where the spark is going to flare up and just capture your attention, right? And just consume you with passion. She
Mm.
is a mom of two. She's a school teacher. We were both soft and fluffy people. There was nothing in her life for 50 years that led her to think that she wanted to be a competitive bodybuilder. And yet
Wow.
here she is, and it just, we fell into that. And then she just realized, wow, I really love this. But you're
Yeah.
so right, Adam. If we didn't start doing 100 things, you would never know which one is the one that's going to be like, oh my gosh, this
Mm.
captures you and it's going to take you into this amazing place in your life.
Mm. Yeah. No, definitely. It's so it's so powerful, isn't it, when you think about it and you think about little tiny, things like going to say going to the gym, or a little, certain experiences that you don't think are going to spark something off, and that's how it works, isn't it? It's quite
Yeah.
magical when you think about it. It's a bit like lighting the kindling. It's
Yeah.
try you could just try something out and something just clicks, and then you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I really like this, and that can just lead on to so much more. Or,
Right.
you might meet someone that might be a potential partner, or whatever. Like you
Totally.
just those situations are out there for you. It's just you've got to kind of go in there and play around with it, if that makes sense, and then it just kind of
No, it
opens
totally
up.
makes sense. Yeah. If you never do anything, you'll never know what you want to do, right? Your passion and your purpose and your mission in your life doesn't fall from the sky. It comes from you trying something and saying, yeah, that's not for me. When she said, you know what, Leanne, why don't you come competitive? Like, why don't you come train with me? And I'm like, no, that is not for me. Right. But other things are like, oh my gosh, I totally want to do that. I totally want to be a belly dancer, for example. Right. And so it's by doing things and a lot of things. And you check in with yourself and you think, did this bring me joy? Would I want to do this again? Does this bring me the feeling that I want to feel? Because when we live the big life that we want to have, it's not about the Mercedes, it's not about the big house and the yacht. It's about the feeling of being so full with your life and your joy and being so magnetic to great opportunities. It's that freedom that most people want to have, right? So it isn't about the yacht and the mansion. It's not about stuff. It's the feeling. So how can you emulate that feeling in your day to day, right? If you want to
Mm,
feel free and just on fire, you have to go try things because you don't know what's going to light you up.
mm. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's so important, isn't it? I think that's sometimes where people get it switched around. Like,
Yeah.
and I think we've all kind of been there, and I remember like buying shirt. I would go out with my friends and I'll buy a shirt like
Yeah.
every single time, and then over time I accumulated all these shirts that I probably wore once for going out, and then
Right.
it's like you're like, well, why am I doing this? Like
Yeah.
we attach things to items and stuff, and it's like you said, how full and happy do you feel with your life and what you want, and um that it's great to have the thing, but
Mhm.
that that feeling is more important, and that satisfaction. rather
Yeah.
than continuing to keep on seeking the next thing, if that makes sense.
Totally, because you can buy every shirt ever made in the history of shirt making, and it will not make you feel the way it makes you feel when
Mm,
you stand up and say, I'm doing something that I feel so passionate about, that this fills me up. You don't need the shirt to
yeah.
fill you up, or the shopping, or the alcohol. I mean, all of these things that people do to numb that feeling inside, or
Mm,
to kind of push down the feeling that they're not doing their passion project, or they're not filling their mission in life.
mm,
They're numbing it out, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to dive into this. I'm going to dive
yeah.
into this. And so that's just, yeah, that's just a thought on that. But no, the shirt example is perfect.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. But no, it's so true though, isn't it? And I think
Yeah.
everyone's different, but I think it's important to be, mindful of the things that you do,
Yeah.
isn't it? Like when it comes
Yeah.
down to it, and
Yeah.
like why. And I was just thinking as well, like, do you have any like mentors or role models like growing up or now?
Yeah. I mean, I really saw, I think I had different role models than most people. Like, I didn't look at celebrities, or, my sister was very much into the celebrities at the time. I was really in love with, you know, um, astronauts and people who did really brave things, so just who were the people that kind of broke through what was expected of them, right? So, I was on a plane when I was small, and there was a female pilot, and I had never seen a female pilot before. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, how brave for her to fly this giant plane. And of course, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. So it was strange to see women in the pilot seat, for sure. But I just always remember looking at people who did really big, brave jobs. So it wasn't about celebrities. It was about, the first fireman that jumped off the truck and ran into the burning building, right? And it was the people who really found it in themselves to be the first, right? To push themselves to do big things. And to me, those were the people that I remember looking at thinking, wow, people who wrote books. I was a huge reader, and I'm like, wow, somebody sat in their house and wrote these words that I get to read. Like, I always understood that to be so powerful. And, coming full circle, I'm that person, right? I'm writing books that
Yeah.
somebody else gets to read. You're doing a podcast that somebody will listen to in their bathtub or on their walk. That is such
Mm,
a powerful thing.
yeah. Yeah, it is powerful, isn't it? It is
Yeah.
powerful. And, like, I think, like, I really like what you mentioned, like, with all of that, with, writing a book and the pages and the words, and, that has come from someone in their thinking, or in that moment, and like
Yeah.
with podcasts, the words that you're saying and what you're talking about, and then with the pilot and doing a big brave job like that. I don't think I could personally do it, like fly. So
I couldn't.
yeah, no, that's it. And like, it's inspiring when you think of people like who do those kind of jobs, and like the firefighters as well, and people of service. You know, they are very, very strong role models, because I think they're being of service for one, and courageous, and risking kind of their life, because lots of things
Mhm.
could happen. And
Totally.
it's really inspiring to to see that, because it makes you think about what you're doing sometimes, and what can
Right.
I do,
How can
and
you be of service, right? And so
mm,
you having this podcast is being of service. Me speaking on your podcast is me being of service
yeah,
to people who want to hear me, who want to hear you,
mm,
right? So it really is like, how do we stay in service?
mm,
And, that kind of mentality, I think, helps us get over the feeling, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not
mm,
strong enough. I'm not qualified enough. I'm not educated enough, right? It kind of gets over some of those feelings that I'm not enough to do this, because
mm,
it's like, I'm going to do the best I can in service of other people.
mm.
And that takes that away. That
Yeah,
fear goes away.
yeah, definitely. Oh, that's a really good point. And have you ever like worked in a restaurant? Have you ever worked in like hotels or
Yeah.
restaurants before? Yeah.
Yeah. I
Like,
worked at a hotel.
nice. And I think everyone should kind of do that kind of job,
Yeah.
be in those situations. Because, I have as well for a while, and
Yeah.
I'm not anymore, but you see a lot of different things. You learn about yourself, and you're being of service to other people. And I mean, I don't want to go off too far on a tangent, but to go in the role of being of service, it
Yeah.
really kind of does change your perspective, I think.
It does. Yeah, I think it gives you this whole other layer of interacting with people, of what you like to do, what you don't like to do, right? So when I think back to, the times that I actually did work in the service industry, I'm kind of doing some of those same things now, right?
Mm,
Like they look different. Obviously they look different because I'm, 30 years later, but the things that I do for people, the way that I help them feel, the
mm,
way that I help give them what they need is exactly the same, right? If you
mm,
come into a restaurant and you're hungry and your waiter or your waitress or your service person gives you your food, you're like,
mm,
okay, this is what I need, right? As a coach, when someone comes to me and they're like, Leanne, I don't know what to do next, like I'm stuck in my business or I'm stuck in my relationships, and
mm,
we talk about what they can do, and then they think, oh my gosh, thank you for giving me what I needed, right? It's that
mm,
same level of I can help you get through the thing that you're facing. And
mm,
so being in service is kind of a lifestyle, right? It
mm,
isn't just I'm going to turn it on today and turn it off tomorrow, or I was a waitress, when I was in my teens, but I'm not doing that anymore. No, the servant philosophy, the servant leadership continues with you throughout your life. And
mm.
so we can embrace that and find ways to do that in the work that we do or in the relationships that we have, our friendships and our volunteering. And we can find ways to still give of ourselves to make it easier for somebody else.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. No, it's definitely powerful, and I think people should definitely try it out. You learn a lot about yourself and other people, and I think it's good to be of service, as well. And
Absolutely.
I was just thinking, like, where can people find you on, like, say, social media, your website, and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So they can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram under 5 Seasons Life, the number 5 Seasons Life, or Leanne Kabat. So yeah, I'm easy to
No,
find.
no, it's awesome. It's awesome, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, Leanne. And
Thank you for having
really,
me. It's been
no, you,
great. I love chatting with you, Adam. You're awesome.
no, no, you're welcome. Thank you, and so are you. And I'm really grateful, to be able to do this, and we can definitely do more of these, and in the future as well.
I love that. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
no, you're welcome. But I wish you all the best in what you're doing, and have a nice day.
Thanks. You too.
You're welcome.